Well, listen, I think we might kick off. So welcome. I'm Lesley Yates. I'm from AAAA. I'm responsible for government relations and advocacy. May I also introduce you to Adam Pay, although I'm sure he needs no introduction.
Hi, everyone.
Adam is a AAA serving board member, and of course, as many of you know, he's the managing director of mycar. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for webinar 2 for 2022. I have to be careful about that. I hope you all checked in to see Stuart Charity, our CEO, and Mark Petter, our board chairman, last week, just talking about the opportunities and challenges of 2022. Adam and I are very happy to be here for number 2. Adam, we've got 177 registered.
Oh, cool. Great.
Yeah, so we outdid Mark and Stuart, but who's boasting? So welcome. Look, we want to give you a sense of what some of the current thinking is from our side about EVs. Adam, I don't think we're going to be able to cover everything in great depth. We've got about a 30-minute. We've only got about a dozen slides, so we won't kill you with PowerPoint because we'd love to get to some questions. So please use the Q&A button to lodge questions. You can do that anytime. Don't wait till the end. I think we're going to be dipping our toe in the water, but Adam and I are very pleased to say that we want to really tackle a couple of the big questions, which is when are they coming? And that kind of myth that is all pervasive about, do you actually need to do anything to them? So I think we are going to challenge some big questions, but in 30 minutes, we're not necessarily going to cover all of the breadth and the depth, but we'll certainly give it a good go, I think. So
I think it'll be a really good start. I mean, it's a very complex topic, but I think it'll be a really good start.
Yeah, I think so too. So why don't we get started? So this is how our debate is currently dominated, isn't it? I'm sure you're seeing this data just as we are. So everyone wants to talk about the latest model release. Everyone's reading what car brands are doing what and when. So you hear pub talk and you know, TV news, current affair, front page of the newspaper, that kind of stuff about by this year, this brand will be all EV, or by this year, this brand will be half EV. So we're getting what we call supply side information. And look, it's interesting. Of course it is. We're car people. We follow what the car brands are doing. But as participants in the aftermarket, it's not really particularly useful data for us to be able to use to plan, because you're all thinking, of course, what we're thinking, which is, sure, that's all very well. That's what they intend to sell, but who's buying them? And what does that mean in terms of the composition of the current car park? What does that tell me about parts manufacturing, about service and repair, and what does that tell me about when? And the answer is not a great deal. And this is a US slide because we're working quite closely with our American sister organization, the Auto Care Association, because some of their data is quite close to ours in terms of consumer demand. So that's what we're working on with our research partners, AAA Research, which is what are the scenario planning under Australian market conditions, and what does that look like in terms of vehicle sales? So in addition to, you know, this brand is bringing out this model on this date, we also have a lot of governments and oppositions, because we're in an election year, saying by this date, you know, 50% of car sales will be electric. So that's what we want to model, and we wanted to reality test it. So we got ACA to plug in a whole lot of assumptions, Adam, about, you know, the pace of buying, about fleet purchase, about individual purchase, and we got them to model 3 scenarios, obviously a high, a medium, and a low. So we have looked at that 50%. We have looked at that 50% penetration by 2030, and we want to see how that translates in terms of vehicles on our roads. So what does it look like? So if half the vehicles sold in 2030 are electric, that translates to 5.6, let's say 6%, shall we? 6% of the car park is electric. 94% is ICE, by the way. So still got petrol vehicles out there, and we've got 6% of the car park being electric based on all the assumptions we built in about how many cars are sold each year, how many cars are retired, about 3 to 4, our car park grows by about 300 to 400,000 every year. We sell close to 1 million new ones. We know that commercial fleets turn them over quickly. We plug all that in in 2030 looks like that, 6%. And I think, Adams, that's the biggest challenge for us, isn't it, as an industry, is should it just pay attention to the 94? So, what does that mean? I mean, 2030 is only 8 years away. So what we're trying to do now is map out what the subsequent years look like. What does 2035, 2040, and 2045 look like? Importantly, when's the tipping point? So if the tipping point in terms of cars sold, 1 in 2 are electric, is 2030, again, that's a very high scenario. If the tipping point for sales is 2030, what's the tipping point for the car park? So you look out your window at all the cars on the road, and 1 in 2 is electric. What's that year? And based on our information from the US, that year is about 2045. So if you run a 4-bay workshop, by 2040, 1 of them's electric. By 2045, possibly 2 are electric. Now, again, Adam, these are US numbers, and that's what we're doing right now, is running the Australian numbers. So we've got all of the election promises, we've got some of the sale, we've got all the sales data, even though they've been significantly interrupted, but we are able to make some realistic predictions based on a high, medium, and low scenario. There is a lot unknown, but there is a lot known. And we're able to make some assumptions that, hopefully are going to give us, our industry, a lot more useful information than just who is releasing what model and when. Because we do need to start looking at what point are EVs rolling into my forecourt, and are my customers saying to me, you know what, I want you to be able to keep servicing my household's vehicles. And Adam, I think what a great segue to start talking about what the board is looking at in terms of enabling our industry to be able to say just that. And you're on that EV subcommittee of the board, looking at what it would take for our members to say that, yes, I can service your vehicle. So in your view, what's the mission of that group?
I mean, it's a really good opener as well, Lesley. I mean, go through those slides and you can pretty much guarantee, whilst we do our best to paint out a really realistic picture over time, you can guarantee that whatever numbers you kind of present, they'll be slightly different by the time reality hits, which is kind of the challenge with this topic here. But I mean, we're onto it. I mean, it's a really simple brief that came about because we want to answer the question, how do we support members to reach a point that they can confidently tell their customer, yes, I can service your EV. I kind of see this as the real moment of truth when it comes to building customer confidence. And we caught up recently, Craig, Peter, you and Stuart and a couple of others. That was like the main piece, saying that's the tipping point. The moment of truth is when the customer talks to us and said, can you now service my EV? And we go, yeah, we got this. That's the point. So what we need to do, or what we're going to do, is investigate the steps and the tools and programs needed to support that outcome. I think the view is that there's no need to overcomplicate. Keeping it simple, keeping it straightforward and evidence-based is the most effective way to bust some myths, kind of build out a real picture and help educate. So over the next 6 months, we're going to develop the tools to support members and the industry to be EV ready. And I can't, this slide that you've moved to here, I love it. So what's it going to take? Well, firstly, I think it's really important to remind ourselves that EV is evolution rather than revolution. Once adoption picks up, we'll need to move at pace. But right now, there's this really healthy runway for the industry to learn and transition. But what we will need to do is all take action. It will need the industry, kind of all of us, to do something about it, to prepare ourselves. So on this slide here, what you'll see is some of the areas that we really need to explore right now in order to plan to embrace EV. And as an industry association, gathering this kind of information will give us a really solid starting point. I said at the beginning, this is a real starting point, but particularly as it relates to assessing the best way that we can help. I do think, though, if you look to the final point, I think this is the most interesting and the most critical from a credibility perspective. If we're not prepared and we can't confidently enter into a conversation with our customer about EVs, I mean, if we dismiss it, or kind of ignore it, or worse, we just say, oh, we don't know much about them, then we're highly unlikely to get their EV into our workshop, which I think is fair to say. What I will say is, though, and what I'm confident about, is our ability as an industry to adapt and change. I mean, we've proved it time and time again. I think keeping our minds open to the opportunities, being really inquisitive and learning, then gearing up and working together as an industry to embrace the future will ensure that the collective kind of from to journey will be smooth and successful. So over the next 6 months, our commitment as a board is to do some really important work to make that happen. Take an evidence-based approach, keep it fact-driven, facts are friendly. Use data that actually matters. Don't get caught up in all of the unnecessary noise. I mean, all you've got to do is click onto LinkedIn, open a newspaper, turn the TV on. There's so much conflicting information, trying to strip back all of the noise and get to the stuff that, the data that really matters. And then look for international experience. I mean, it's like we're not the first nation that's been faced with this kind of evolution. Let's look to countries like Norway that have been here before for some really good insight. So I think the key piece for us here, Lesley, is to be disciplined in our approach.
Mm-hmm. Look, it won't be a surprise to anyone who's decided to have lunch with us today, Adam, that we wanted particularly to have you on this webinar, given recent announcements by mycar. And I think the industry is very curious about your recent announcements about your relationship with EV Direct. And I think a lot of people would love to hear, particularly from your mouth, in your own words, about what that relationship is.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see by the smile on my face, we're really excited by this opportunity. But just take a step back and by way of context. So BYD is one of the world's largest EV vehicle manufacturers. EV Direct is the sole distributor of BYD EVs to Australia. They offer a direct-to-customer model where EVs are purchased online and then delivered to their new owners by mycar at selected stores. And then from that point on, mycar picks up all of the service, repair and warranty work. I mean, we're delighted with the opportunity, and the entire organisation is extremely excited to be entering into the EV category. But we also see that this kind of reflecting positively on the industry as a whole too. Kind of builds credibility. It's demonstrated that we're gearing up, we're looking to the future, and we're staying ahead of the curve. So all really exciting. But your question, though, is kind of how we felt we were ready to do this. I don't know that we were. We just got started. I mean, we didn't know a great deal about it until we started researching. We gathered information. We looked for relevant data, talked to people that we thought could help, and then looked to other countries, like we've mentioned before, like Norway, and businesses within them for inspiration. I mean, I think if I remember rightly, we locked in our EV plan or strategy kind of as recently as mid-2021. But we figured out if you start somewhere, you're likely to reach a destination, and likely earlier than if you didn't start at all. But it's been a really interesting journey too. I mean, I certainly can't take credit for it. We've got a very small team that we kind of added this to their day jobs. We certainly don't have an EV department. So the task of bringing this to life was added to people's day jobs, and not many people either. But and they've done a fantastic job, and it's been busy, exciting. But now we've got a far greater understanding of EV, and we've actually, by virtue, got a really small group of resident EV gurus at mycar now. So it's exciting for us. But I think really for us, the key was that our appetite to explore EV existed early, no different to to anybody else and the way that anybody else on this call can approach it from a business perspective. But our plan focused really on growing capability and credibility in the near term, and then look to leverage commercial partnerships to scale and drive awareness thereafter. I think that it specifically as it relates to evaluating the EV direct partnership, we had to consider all of the stuff that anybody else on this call, when they're thinking about their own business, would need to do. The kind of investment that was required in terms of store fit out, EV chargers, PPE, safety considerations, our ability to progressively grow our network of EV ready stores as customer demand increases. You know, build it and they'll come probably doesn't work in this kind of environment. So it's kind of mapping out the geographical hotspots for electric vehicles too, putting stores where they needed to be. And then we needed to get the support from BYD, and they've been absolutely fantastic in terms of access to technical training, vehicle data and parts. We had to get capacity to train our technicians at a pace that was aligned to EV direct growth projections. But importantly, we needed to assess whether the two organisations were kind of culturally aligned too, sufficiently agile enough to work together and able to adapt as the demand and technology changed. But there was a lot of work given the potential volume, but it was really, really important that the team kept it simple, didn't overcomplicate, and one of the key pieces here was kind of really keep an open dialogue with EV Direct and be really open about the fact that we're kind of learning as we go too. So for us, it's still early. We're really excited. It's going well, but we're really excited for the future. So that's basically how that kind of played out.
Yeah, I think that excitement is felt throughout the whole industry, Adam, and we've certainly used this and some other developments in our sector to have a discussion with government about, you're putting a lot of emphasis on the point of sale, on saying to consumers, yes, you can charge them, there are charging stations, and yeah, here's $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to offset the cost. But we've been talking to government about, but are you talking to us about concerns that consumers have, that they will have choice of repairer, that they can keep using their repairer, especially in rural and regional areas. And we are working with government right now on skilling up. So this has given us an opportunity to say to government, we really want to have an EV policy that is comprehensive. You need to be talking to the aftermarket. It's not just a point of sale conversation.
Absolutely.
It's about the life of the vehicle. Also talking to government about parts, about the excitement activities of IM Group in terms of batteries. So we've got a whole conversation that is much more about the life of the vehicle than it is about giving consumers $3,000 off what is a pretty expensive purchase.
Yes.
So I think it's your public announcement is another way to hit government with, we are in the business of EVs. We're already in it.
Yeah.
And of course, I think the other thing, Adam, is that, you know, up until this point, it's been a lot of conversation about, you know, do they actually need any servicing?
Yeah, I mean, particularly as it relates to this topic, there's a lot of conflicting information. I think I touched on it earlier. It doesn't matter what you do, turn on the TV, open a newspaper, jumped on LinkedIn. It's kind of really confusing. But basically, as far as I'm concerned, it's a real oversimplification. I know the US has got some research on this, and we're going to be adding to that with the AAA research on what that looks like in the Australian context. But I think it's really important to remember that we don't actually know yet. I mean, we've got no idea how these vehicles deteriorate on our roads. I mean, they run hot, they're heavy, the battery performance must always be optimal. Maybe the cost is lower per visit, but maybe there are 2 or 3 different service categories. So I think it's kind of a real oversimplification, quite dangerous when you look at it like this. But if you nip to the next slide, Lesley, there's contrary to popular belief, I mean, EVs still need a lot of the basics: tires, brakes, suspension, aircon. I mean, I didn't know until a couple of weeks ago that they still needed 12-volt batteries. So there's a whole heap of stuff that they still need. And you know, this slide kind of adds a little colour to that. But the other thing is that what we haven't explored fully yet is how often we see EVs in the workshops. we can't simply compare the annual ICE vehicle inspection to EV. I mean, in some of the other markets right now, there's already talk of regular and really frequent battery degradation checks that need to be carried out, need these vehicles to come back into workshops more often. That in itself presents an additional touch point with the customer. Then you've got the diagnosis, the programming, the updating, all of those opportunities are yet to be understood. And then the question of the alternate products and services gets raised. You know, we're likely to have other service options to offer EV owners, and there'll be different kinds of general repairs required in time. And you know, the discussion that we're having at the board level right now is, can we think about new service options that truly add value and support our EV customers? And what we're already seeing in more mature EV markets around the globe, where can we glean some concrete examples and insights? But ultimately, I'll come back to it and go, facts are friendly. And they really help quieten the noise and enable us to build out a realistic view. So as an association, that's what we intend to do.
And I think our ability to get together as an industry, Adam, and start talking about these servicing options, because maybe there's an opportunity as an industry to start to standardize the nomenclature so that a customer knows, oh, I'm in for my battery optimization check, or I'm in for my this check. Just that sense amongst the industry of, yep, we see you twice a year, not once, or we see you 3 times. I mean, that cost of that battery is so extensive in terms of its proportion of the cost of running an EV. It makes sense for a consumer to check that there is energy optimization, that the energy from the battery to the wheels is unencumbered, is that the vehicle is charging. So we're going to have to be an expert in different fields now, aren't we?
We are. I think, you know, so I've kind of joined an EV group on Facebook. I'm stalking people on Facebook at the moment to try and understand what's ticking their boxes and what's motivating them. And I'd encourage people on this call to do the same, because there's some really, really good stuff and gives you a kind of look into their world about what's important to a driver of an EV. Equally, what they're nervous about around buying an EV, and what will give them comfort about buying an EV. And then when they've bought the vehicle, the kind of stuff that's really important to them. And it's very different to what's important to an ICE driver in some cases, but that does point to alternate products, services and revenue streams in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a good dialogue for us to be having, as you've said right now. I think, Adam, I'm going to open this up to some questions, but while I'm having a look for the questions, I will say, let's put in a bit of an ad here for Expo, because the the Australian Automotive Aftermarket Expo in April will have a workshop of the future focus. We're certainly going to be talking all things EV. That is incredibly exciting, I think, and it gives us an opportunity to deepen this conversation, as I'm sure some of the questions will have for us. So let's have a look at some of these. I want to start, Adam, with a question that I received from Pete Rogers about just the timing of EVs. And his question was quite challenging. He said, what do you say to a workshop owner who says, you know what, if the timeline is 2040, maybe 2045, I think I might give this whole EV discussion a miss?
It's a question that comes up all the time. I don't know. I've kind of taken it out to 2040 or 2045 in my mind just yet. But I'd say, so Peter, thanks for the question, mate. I mean, to be frank though, I think it's really short-sighted. I don't want to upset anybody, but I think it's really short-sighted view. I mean, the way I look at it is that if the industry's served you well over the years, it's kind of our responsibility to pay it forward and prepare the industry for the next generation. I get disappointed when I hear people, in our industry kind of ignoring the opportunity and even leaning into the same or the similar views of the non-believers. Now, I heard last week, that people won't buy them. They won't take off in my area. There's a lack of range, both vehicle options and distance, and the charging infrastructure isn't sufficient. What happens? This is a classic. What happens if you want to drive from Sydney to Melbourne? I just go, when was the last time you did that? All you've got to do with that kind of thing is just jump on and look at all of these apps around the charging infrastructure now. There's no problem traveling from Sydney to Melbourne. All of these kinds of this range stuff. I mean, I'm looking at, I'm exploring EV options at the moment, and the mileage that they cover on one charge is way more than I'll ever need in a couple of weeks. And I just go, we just got to try and debunk some of these myths. So I go, for me, it's old thinking, and it's the type of thinking that will stand in the way of our industry becoming EV ready. I think, Pete, the questions that I kind of say we've got to ask ourselves, what if you manage a local fleet of 6 to 10 cars? I mean, it's likely very soon that you'll see at least one of these cars will be EV. And if you can't meet the EV requirements, where does the rest of the fleet go? That's a question we're asking ourselves at mycar at the moment. If you can't service EV, will the customer bring in their petrol vehicle? If the household's got an EV and they use that for day to day, they've got a 4-wheel drive for recreation, are we going to lose this customer? I think we've got to really, really kind of sit back and ask ourselves these questions, because it's a transition. I say it's evolution, not revolution. So this is kind of a transition in time. It's a vehicle that's just propelled by a different kind of fuel. Like, let's not get too scared by it. Let's just kind of keep an open mind, remain inquisitive, and learn. I mean, let's not forget word of mouth. We all talk about word of mouth. So, a customer walking away from your workshop saying they could or they couldn't service my EV will travel really, really, really fast. And it's unlikely that the dealer's going to want to let go of this customer easily. So we need to present a capable and a kind of unified, sophisticated EV option.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'll say is, it's the horse has bolted. So it's not if EV are going to come. It's like they're coming. So you can either bury your head in the sand or lift your head up and go, there's an opportunity here. I want to be part of the next part of the journey. And I go, great, fantastic.
Yep. And thank you. I appreciate that, Pete. I hope that's a good comprehensive response. Got a question here from John Wood about data and about whether we've got state by state. Yes, John, we do. Send me an email and I'll send that to you. What I will say about our data, there's a problem with data in terms of Tesla and VFAX. We get our data from ABS, which makes it more accurate, but slightly behind. So we actually have every EV by postcode, by the way, but that's accurate as of kind of January 2021. And with the exponential growth, it means it does go out of date, but it does still give you a sense about propensity. Because if you've got a postcode with a lot of EVs, you've got a population that has a tendency to take up this as their preferred fuel of choice. So please drop me an email at lesley@aaa.com.au if you want some more EV data. I'm happy to give that to you. Adam, Ryan Davis asks a great question, which is, what's your view about EV charging at workshops?
Yeah, I mean, I should ask the experts at mycar. I mean, Keith would be able to answer this question better than I could. I think you've really got to think about the purpose of them. I mean, you don't want to overinvest. It's really important. If you're going to repair service and repair EV vehicles at your workshop, well, it's kind of like if I took my phone into Apple and I was getting it repaired, I want it to come back with a fully charged battery. So I think having the EV charger in store says that it's going to be an expectation of the customer that if it's in there for service and repair, well, it's going to come out with a full battery. It's interesting, somebody was challenging us, or I had a conversation with somebody a couple of weeks ago. They're going, yeah, but what about if you run out of power on your car? But you're highly unlikely to do that, because you're going to treat your car like you treat your phone. So whenever you go anywhere with a phone and you fall across a phone charger, you kind of plug it in and I'll get a bit of zap for 5 or 10 minutes. So the way you're going to treat your vehicle too. So maybe you have EV chargers on the outside of your building so people can use them as they go past. But you'll certainly, if you're in EV service and repair, will have an EV charger in your workshop.
Yeah. Adam's taken that question a little bit further. Adam and asked about whether mycar is going to have chargers on your sites.
So we'll definitely have chargers in the workshop. As to whether we'll have the chargers on site will be still remain to be seen. We're still working this out as we go.
Yeah. I've got a great reminder, Adam, from Stewart Charity about mandatory data sharing. So, and it's a good reminder to let people know that Stewart is going to be delivering a webinar next week on mandatory data sharing, but there is a specific issue in the mandatory data sharing legislation, in the regulations about EVs. So we, of course, wanted to ensure that there is access to EV information for service and repair, and we made sure that the legislation included that. And in order to satisfy concerns people may have about safety, there is a requirement that vehicle professionals who are working on EVs undertake a 10-hour decommissioning safety course effectively, and it is a recognised TAFE course. It has a code, and that will be made available to repairers, to technicians, to undertake as a precondition to registering for access to EV service and repair information. We're really quite excited about this for a couple of reasons. One is that absolute acceptance by government that we are repairing EVs. Excellent. We were comfortable with the 10-hour course because in our view, it is fit for purpose. It is a safety and a general knowledge course. There are going to be other training offerings available in the market, and watch this space for some more information from us and from other providers about proficiency and competence. But that 10-hour course, you'll be able to undertake that 10-hour unit, then provide evidence to the vehicle manufacturer that you've completed that. That'll be a tick, and you'll therefore be accredited to receive EV data for service and repair of vehicles. So I think it assists us to be able to have that conversation, Adam, with customers. Can you repair my EV? Yep, I've done this unit according to the federal government's legislation for access to service and repair information on fair and reasonable commercial terms. I've passed the regulated hurdle to get that information. So that's a very good start. This might also be a good opportunity to let people know that we are currently on a Standards Australia committee to review the workshop setup for automotive service and repair. That standard was developed in 2015 and it's currently undertaking a review. And that's the standard that tells a workshop what's the checklist that you need in terms of servicing an electric vehicle. What you mentioned, Adam, you're gearing up for specific tools, for gloves, for insulated tools. There's also a requirement for being able to label the vehicle, to either a wing mirror or a sign on the top saying electric vehicle and under service. There is a requirement to ensure that that bay is free from distraction during particularly specific elements of the service. You need to be able to say, don't walk through here, don't distract this technician. I don't think anything in that AS 5732 is onerous. And I think it's going to enable us as an industry to be able to provide members with a checklist of what's required. Just that sense of, okay, if I'm doing the following things, again, I'm able to keep my staff safe, but I'm also able to give the market confidence that I know what I'm doing. So I think that's valuable. And thanks, Stuart, for the reminder about EV repair information. Pete Rogers has asked about Expo. Yes, there will certainly be information available on EVs at Expo. We're pretty excited about our workshop of the future, and we've got a demonstration stage there as well. So expect to see a fair bit at Expo. And just relating back to that comment I made about the workshop standard, Pete, we're going to be giving you a sneak peek into some of the things that might be in the brand new standard. So we can pretty much anticipate what some of the changes are going to be, and we're going to be able to integrate those into giving people the very latest information about what it might mean for you to gear up to be EV ready. So it's very exciting. Adam, we've got a question here from John Allen, which is fabulous, about new services and products. He agrees with your comment about it might be a different service profile, but he's also interested in alternative ownership models. So, and I think this has certainly been on our horizon, subscription ownership, and how does that change the makeup of how we sell our services to the market?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of uncharted territory, isn't it, for us? And I don't know that it's kind of a webinar in its own right, that one. There's I don't quite know the answer to it, but all I'd say is that I think we're going to see more and more customers going for this subscription model. I mean, what you're seeing in other markets, and you'll see here, is that people are quite nervous about stepping into EV because they're really unsure. You've got all of the same kind of concerns that I was touching on. What's the range? How do I get from Sydney to Melbourne? You know, all of this other stuff that people are talking about. And you go, they're actually taking an opportunity to kind of step into this subscription and try EV as subscription because it's a safety net. I did see something pop up earlier around hydrogen.
Yes, yes, from Darren. Yeah.
Earlier, and it just kind of links with that too. If you look into some of the more mature markets like the UK, they've gone quite heavily into kind of hybrid and hydrogen and bits and bobs because I think there was kind of a lack of understanding. They were, you know, one of the few first markets to kind of get into it. So they were edging their bets and going, oh, I don't want to go full EV yet. I'll go hybrid or I'll go. The sense that we're getting at the moment is that in Australia, the kind of hybrid piece will just because of all of the information you've got access to from around the globe, we might just skip that and go straight to full EV, which is quite interesting. But what it will do is it will kind of cause people to try it maybe through a subscription model. But I think then in answer to the question, just make sure that your business is doing business with the people that got the subscription models.
Mm-hmm. And a similar question, I think, from Doug Glover is, do you expect there to be more home or mobile services as a result of EV take-up?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a really good question. If you think about the fact that they're not quite as dirty or as involved as the cars that we're working on now. They don't need to be whipped up and oil drained and filter off and all of that stuff that we know from research around mobile. Customers are kind of uncomfortable with that on their driveway. So when you've got an EV that doesn't need that kind of work, yeah, I would imagine that there would be more propensity for customers to be accepting of vehicles to be repaired on their driveway. And maybe it's a kind of a quick look at the tyres, the brakes, the suspension, check the 12-volt battery, make sure, but it's kind of not lifting it up and getting into the real detail of changing oil and filter and spark plugs and timing belts and stuff. So yes, I would imagine that it would open opportunities up for businesses to take more of this mobile. Yeah.
I've got another question from Doug about accessories, and I think we might take that one offline, Doug. It's a whole other conversation that we're currently having about how do we modify the vehicle and accessorize the vehicle and what's the interface. And so I think we might end up, Adam, with a whole parts and EV conversation, and we're currently working on something behind the scenes that is quite exciting. One of the debates that's going on in the chat area, Adam, which is fascinating, is Arnold Mao from Dayco saying, you know what, I love my ICE. I like the noise, I like the performance, I don't want your EV. And right underneath is Charlie Ayres from the US saying he's got 4 EVs in his garage. He could not be more excited about driving these cars. He loves them.
You see, therein lies the kind of landscape that you're operating in at the moment. I mean, I would say, so I love driving cars too. I love my ICE vehicle and I love the noise. Music on, foot down, got that roar from the exhaust, love it. My question would be if you've driven an EV, because I'd get down to your local Tesla and just book in for the half-an-hour test drive, because you don't quite get an appreciation for what an EV can feel like to drive until you drive one. And they're pretty incredible. In my mind, it's sort of like once I've tried an EV, I'm not going back. So I'll be really careful about how close I get to them because I might never drive an ICE vehicle again. They are impressive to drive. But I would say, I mean, this is evolution, not revolution. Like, there's going to be ICE vehicles on our roads for years and years and years to come. And you can see by the uptake in the ownership of vehicles sold into the market, we've got lots and lots of ice vehicles on the road for a long, long, long time to come. So it's evolution versus revolution. We've just got to kind of, as an industry, take a step back and go, where does the true opportunity lie here? Because it's coming. Horses bolted. I said it earlier. It's coming. So kind of stepping back and taking a really well thought out, well executed transition from one to the other means that, you know, we can service petrol, diesel, and electric vehicles. It's just different propulsion type, long, long, long into the future, and the industry will be in good shape. We just need to kind of lean into it and go, it's coming, and what do we need to do to prepare ourselves? Quite simple.
Yeah. Adam, I just think that was a wonderful kind of question to finish upon, actually, because I think the statements that we're hearing are less about an all or nothing. It's less about, you know, 94% ice, just keep your eye on that prize. Less about, oh my God, as you say, if all of my news feed is full of EVs, if I took that as my only source of market intelligence, I'd be doing nothing but EVs. There's still going to be consumer preference. There is still going to be an industry for us, albeit a different type of industry and different types of servicing. It's an evolution and not a revolution. I think we might adopt that as our own, Adam. Thanks for that. So I think this is probably a nice way for us to round up today's conversation. Can I thank each and every one of you for tuning in, and thank you for all of the banter that's happened on the chats. I've had some calls around this one as well, because this will shape what we do in the future. It will certainly be shaping what the EV strategy group is examining in terms of what we deliver out to members to ensure that they are EV ready should they wish to be. So it's been a useful conversation and a great interaction for us to have with you. On your behalf, can I say an incredible thank you to Adam Pay. That was wonderful. Thank you. Just to have you talk particularly about the EV direct relationship and to lend us some insight into some of your thinking at mycar. I think a couple of takeaways I took from that too is, you know, were you EV ready? Not really. We kind of made it up as we went along. That's probably the adage and the theme of our whole industry, isn't it? And I also liked your statement about we don't have an EV department. So I think that's particularly insightful, because we're talking about groups that are slightly smaller than mycar in terms of footprint. And a statement like, you know what, we didn't necessarily have a whole group of people who were EV experts. That's very interesting. And let's face it, we're car people. All of us are car people. And whether they're fueled by hydrogen or electricity or by petrol, we still remain car people that care about keeping our customers on the road safely in a vehicle that is fueled by the fuel of their choice. So thank you very much, Adam. Thank you to everyone on the line. As per usual, do please contact us if you'd like any more information. And our wonderful Michelle Vizzuti will make sure that you've got copies of this recording, and please do get in touch if you'd like some of these slides. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adam, and please enjoy.
Thanks, Lesley. Thanks, everybody. I really enjoyed being here today, so thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye now.